Welcome, Andy. Great to have you here. It'd be great to have a quick introduction from yourself and from also sort of the background on Tecna as well. That'd be great to hear.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my background is design, but I'm a head of sales at Tecna. Tecna is a creator of exhibitions, events, live experiences, but we also hinge on the word responsible creators. You'll see that used in our marketing, and that's very important because we're responsible for people's budget, their time, their brand, their ROI, their return. So we take that very seriously. So yeah, my role in a nutshell is to fuse between sales primarily and the other commercial elements of the business, design, bit of projects, and obviously the marketing sort of side as well. So yeah, I've got a great role, really, hinged between some exciting departments with some cool stuff going in all the time. And it's a big year for us, obviously, as a brand. We've relaunched, rebranded, and that's going really well. And I think people get it. And they should in our sector. It should be understandable. So yeah, that's my background. But like I say, design led, commercially focused. That's the little phrase, isn't it?
Very much so. Very lucky man.
I am a lucky man.
This is part of FFAIR's Event Expert Series. It's a practical solution for event pros. Today we're diving into a topic we heard at the Business of Events Global Policy Forum, and that sparked our curiosity and actually a bit of alarm as well. So in January 2025, the World Economic Forum released its Future of Jobs Report 2025, and it surveyed 1,000 employers representing over 14 million workers across 55 countries. The report identified that graphic design is one of the 11th fastest declining job categories over the next 5 years. And that's a significant shift as well from the previous report, where it was considered a moderately growing profession. And kind of that rings true with sort of my experience as well at the time. This is worrying for events. But do you think event organisers are aware of the issue that could cause them?
It's really interesting, actually, because I've looked at the report. I mean, it's a big report. There's a lot of work in it. There's a lot of gravity in it. I think we can look at it as being a good signal for an industry, for a company, for a trade association, whatever it is, as being based on a lot of very good data. It specifies graphic design, but I think more widely, design falls into the same category. The only difference, I suppose, we all know our trade really well. A piece of artwork or a drawing isn't going to fall over and kill somebody. It doesn't need voyage control. It doesn't need regs and rams and stuff. So there is a difference between graphic design and 3D design. But I don't think organisers really are aware of that, or shows more generally, because I think we should involve the venues and other contractors and trade associations in that as well. Perhaps they're not aware of it. I think they will be. I think it'll start to manifest itself in other ways, in terms of just that sort of shortfall of skill set. And as I'm sure we'll talk about, really, design underpins so many things that we see and we do, and the activations that we work on all the time, and exhibitors expect or demand, actually, these days. So I think the value of exhibitions will be undermined if we lose an element of design coming into the sector. Yeah, I think you're right. Whether the organisers specifically have fully grasped that yet, not sure. I mean, they may not. There are obviously many more exhibitors than organisers. So in terms of bulk worry, as a phrase. It's bound to come up in conversation when stands are being booked and things like that, and when people are looking for referrals and nominated and verified suppliers. So I think there'll be an element of it, yes, but the on the ground sort of proof in the pudding, sort of, or in the hall, probably not yet. I don't think we've probably seen that cascade in that way, and there's probably a sort of a don't look in case it's bad news feel to it as well, really. I guess that's human nature, and that's no disrespect to anybody there. That's the nature of how we're wired, aren't we?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And is it something you're seeing in the industry, and are you experiencing the same thing at Tecna with hiring and with skill shortages? Is that something you're seeing closer to home?
No, we're not really, I don't think. I mean, I think we're in a way we're insulated because we're quite a specific type of company who, like I say, are in a brand launch a year. So there's a certain, attraction to that, really, in terms of we're the designers in the business, and that the creative team has grown quite recently to a healthy size, and some fantastic designers in the business already, and some new ones have come in, and they've come from very divergent sectors, some from other sectors, as well as some from agencies. So we've got a really, really good team, which is lovely, and it's not my main point. My main point is they are already quite diverse. So you've got young and sort of older designers, you've got some very experienced in sort of straight design, let's call it, some in interiors. So I think we're probably quite lucky because of the brand launch. We've attracted a certain amount of interest inherently that maybe other companies wouldn't have that luxury, let's call it. But going forward, I'm always trying to think about, what we'll be thinking, doing, and saying and designing in the future, not now. I'm sales, but I'm totally reliant on the design quality. So the quality of design thinking is obviously, so much more important, really. And if you think about exhibition design, or any design really, where else really do you start with a clean sheet, metaphorically? You've got to think about, writers, architects, musicians, sculptors. They're the only ones that start with nothing, or a brief, let's call it. If you think about the other way, scientists, art being opposed to science as such in many ways, you've got to think about, even a chef has a recipe. So there's something to be said for the fact that design is tough, because you are starting with, unless you have a lot of guidance, a clean sheet. And obviously, I think therefore we're always really trying to attract excitable thinkers rather than just designers, if that makes sense. And that's quite difficult, actually, in a sector which is not always known for being exciting, unless you're already in it. We both know how great it can be, but like anything, it's difficult to encourage people from, say, hospitality, when that sector has got its own challenges and its own demands. So I think we haven't really seen it, to answer your question, but I think there'll come a point maybe this year where we start to either benefit exponentially from that because of sort of snowball effect as we grow, or the opposite, where we do find that some markets of graduates, let's say specifically, are drying up.
So how I think we had a short conversation about this, but how did your designers get into events? What was it that attracted them to events in general, and Tecna specifically? And what did you do to attract them? Because I know from my perspective, when I did an industrial design degree, and I came out of university, and I picked the job based on the technical skills that I had.
Yeah.
And events being the hidden industry, no one really knows about it, and no one's ever promoted it to me prior. It was purely based on the software that I knew that got me into events. Was it a similar story, or different for different people?
It's a mix. Some people have fallen into the sector. A few people came to the sector post-COVID, obviously, that weren't in it before. That's obviously great. And like you, I know a lot of product designers, industrial designers, used to live with them at university, etc. And they always had the sort of the cool design job, whereas the interior architecture was sort of almost like, poor man's architecture. So there's that sort of background to it as well. Product design and furniture design to a degree as well. Very, very technical, very materials driven, very functional driven, that sort of thing. Whereas the flip side of interiors and space architecture, let's say, is a little bit more aspirational, let's say, and a bit more whimsy. But I think one of the attractions really, probably for the designers that we've attracted, but also in the wider industry, is that it's now quite multi-skilled. You're not only looking about people who just design a stand, you're really creating an activation of which the stand is a piece of architecture that hopefully helps that. When you're also talking about the digital blend as well, a lot of designers are they're almost multi-skilled, but shallow skilled. A lot of them have a good but not fantastic array of different things they do, but they do all of them pretty well. Some of them, obviously, I'm understanding, some do them very well. And if you come from a top agency, you're probably looking at activations and engagement strategies and data mechanics and all those sort of things, where really it's quite different to sort of standard exhibition architecture, which is more about color, texture, and lighting and psychology. So I think that's probably the attraction that I think we've benefited from. And we're not known historically as being a very diverse company in terms of the modular orientation of the background of the company. That's changed already. It's much wider than that now, and the work we're producing now is fantastically interesting for the staff, as well as obviously for the teams, as well as the clients, and that's great. And it should be that way. It should be aspirational. So I think we probably benefited from both, really, both the idea that the industry's got more interesting, but also the fact that we're encouraging, if you like, better design rather than just more of it.
And with focusing specifically on stand design, you said it's a blank canvas. To me, it feels like it's a multidisciplined design process. So there's graphic design, there's structural design. You said it yourself: material uses, and texture, and lighting design. With your team, are they mixed skill sets, or are they generalists, so they can do a bit of everything?
They're certainly all generalists, as in they're very good at dropping into whatever we need. We can have hotspots during the year where we tend to be more mechanical, and then we'll have a big project come up which needs to be quite avant-garde and do a lot of thinking about lighting and dynamics and moving head technology and stuff like that. But I think there are obviously, as part of a creative team, under a head of creative, they're really good at obviously being able to drop into those elements and then really sort of dig down and learn more. So lighting is actually a great example. You mentioned it, so did I. It's easy to underlight a stand and turn a great stand into a pretty ropey one, and definitely vice versa. Everybody's always said that. That's nothing unique to my opinion. But I really like that. I like the idea that you can always go off and find a new supplier who's got a new, different sort of moving head or something to add dynamics to an otherwise static stand. So lighting is a great example. Texture and color, without a doubt. Planning, the basics, if you like, have become really quite interesting, because you could argue that, well, everything's been done, but of course it haven't, because small scale sectors, let's call them, like emerging sectors like wearable technologies and bioscience and those sorts of things, they can learn from the sectors that have spent many, many years and many, many billions over the years, aerospace, straight healthcare, those sort of things, and learn what works, and cross-pollinate sectors is a really, really good thing, I think, for the design teams in every company, not just Tecna, to get used to. Doing on a Thursday what you didn't even know how to do on a Monday, Tuesday is really exciting. And when you're learning about finishes and colors and lighting and all the stuff we just mentioned, I guess that's really that's the lever, isn't it? To actually saying, right, shit, that worked really, really well in that farmer job we did last week. Let's use that type of data technology and persona marketing and drop it into this stand, which budget-wise may not sort of deserve it, didn't think it could achieve it, but if you can do that and drop that thinking in, that's really, really good. That's great design, rather than just good design. So I think really for the designers, it's always a learning curve, and it always should be. Every day's a school day, right? It certainly is for me and you, Adam. We learn stuff, I'm sure, new every day, and designers are absolutely, I'm sure, their mindset is exactly the same. It's always nice no one wants to repeat the design too many times. That's where AI comes in. I think you look to do something new and leave a mark, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as designers, you want something that's unique to you. I see a lot of pure thoroughbred designers not really wanting to use Canva, because to them it's their design integrity. I think that's slightly changing a little bit now, but yeah, I think designers want to mark their own stamp on things.
Yeah, they want a signature, don't they? And we have that. We've got one specific designer who I won't name, and she's really, really great at blending in sort of timbers into historically modular materials and giving that lovely hybrid blend of foliage and timber and interesting pendant lighting and stuff like that. You wouldn't argue that any one of those things is unique to that person, but the way it's blended in really beautifully. And then we're very proud of the images we post and the internal communications we have with the teams, and especially the installation teams. That's where it fails or wins, doesn't it? So I think following that all the way through to a quality installation that started with a really cool design it's part of that signature, isn't it? My jobs always look great when they're fitted, because they're blah blah blah, because I gave the thought to the lighting or the texture or whatever the things we've said. So I think that you're right. Giving a designer or a design team the chance to have their own signature is really important. Otherwise, again, it just you're only as good as the work you leave behind.
Yeah, and as a designer, I think as well, you almost want people to recognize your work, and you get that in other industries. You get it in art. That's a Constable. That's
I agree.
Lowry. You get it in architecture. That's a Bauhaus. I think that's probably what a lot of designers are hoping for when it comes to stand design. walk through an exhibition hall and go, oh yeah, that's an Andy Hickinbotham, and
Well,
that's
I'm not sure about that. But I do think you're right. I can think of some other suppliers. I won't necessarily name check them all, but there's a few in the industry, especially on the agency side, where you sort of look at it and think, well, that must be I don't know, an Equinox design or whoever it happens to be, just simply because of those signature traits. Maybe the use of color, the use of backlighting, the use of different things, as well as obviously now you've got that other brand palette of AV and different types of AV usage and coverage. That's really come to the fore, really, in terms of, no one's impressed by an LED screen anymore, but if you content's great, the data capture's great, and it really blends into a bigger piece of architecture. Yeah, they are. They just don't realize they're impressed by it because it's part of the bigger picture. No pun intended. So I think you make a good point there.
So what does the lack of design or designers in events mean in real term?
I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge to draw graduates out of university who want to come to the sector, not just to learn their skill set and then move on, but to obviously stay within the skill set. Even against everything I've just said, the challenge is still there, because obviously if we don't have the best design, we are a very, very visual industry, obviously, but also it needs to be safe, needs to be sustainable, needs to be all the other attributes that we all talk about quite a lot when we're in the profession. So I think really the challenge, if you like, the difficulty is going to be making sure that we bring the right people into the industry and who really wants to make that impact that we've just been talking about, but also want to stay in the industry, because as the designers with the longest histories aren't necessarily the ones who don't have that signature, as you've just been saying. So I think that the danger for organisers and to a lesser extent for venues, but certainly for the larger contractors and agencies, is just making sure that sort of new thinking comes in. And it's great with a mentor program. I'm lucky enough to be a mentor, but there are many people who are mentored in the industry working with let's say a new designer or even a new salesperson or a project manager. And sometimes it's a two-way street, right? It's not always the case that the old head knows everything. Absolutely not. It's usually the case that new thinking and a new style of thinking comes the other way, back up the chain. Like any good management, it's two or three way, isn't it? And sideways. So I think it's the same thing with design. Stuff that works this year in design probably wasn't necessarily even ideated a few years ago, and it will be the same hopefully going forward. And that's not just to do with new tech and AI. That is to do with the things I've been mentioning briefly there. Sustainable materials is a great one. Over talked about. A lot of sustainability fatigue in the industry, still always will be, but it's actually really, really interesting when you dig down to it in terms of life cycle and all that sort of supply chain management that I do a lot of work on. So those really are the things that are probably going to float the boat of designers who come into the industry. So the key is, to answer your original point, is highlighting it. I think using maybe awards should be talking about maybe a design process, rather than just the eventual installed stand or piece of architecture. So you're almost rewarding people and awarding them for thinking rather than delivery. Most awards obviously relate to the image of the final stand, maybe a case study thrown in. Perhaps we have to rethink that as an industry and think about how we talk about collaboration between competitors, peers, rivals. There's other ways to do this, isn't there? That makes it really interesting, because a designer coming in won't necessarily be aware of that, but it might keep their attention for longer than a couple of years, and obviously give them a chance to sort of shine across a wider sort of viewing audience, really. Like I say, peers, trade associations, venues, organisers. Most, I've been told from a university that I do a bit of work with now and again, that the majority of people going onto event management courses, for example, tend to arrive wanting to be a wedding planner, which is quite funny, and it's like a weird thing to say. But that same course has never had any wedding planners that have left the course. They've transformed their thinking into, once they know a bit more about the event and exhibition sector, and we should call it event sector, because this does bring in other things other than just trade exhibitions. But generally speaking, once they realise what they can get out of the event management sort of side of things in exhibitions, the wedding planning seems to go away, really, which is bizarre, really. Who's planning all the weddings? But it's I found that really interesting little factoid, which was they have so many, majority of people entering it go for that reason, but to come out the other end after 3 years or possibly 4 years, not going into that profession because they found something more that you and I would recognise as exhibition stand design or event management in this case. I find that very interesting because that just shows there's a journey within the education. Therefore, getting in early, I would say, at the beginning or even at school level, such as the Power of Events does, get in early and actually show people how diverse the sector can be. Surely that's the key. I think if we don't do that, you again, to your point, we'll lose a bit of acceleration here, and over the next few years we might lose people to other more perceived sexy sectors.
Yeah, it's so with design, I don't think there was one person on my course or any conversations that I had around wanting to go into events, and that's a worry for me. I stumbled into it, obviously, but it wasn't an aspiration. People wanted to work with Dyson, they wanted to work for Nike, or they wanted to be in automotive. There wasn't this real kind of, it just wasn't visible. So I think that's potentially a challenge that we could overcome by, there are event management courses, and I don't think there were event management courses in university when we started in the industry. So that's a great step forward. I think perhaps what we need to do as an industry is actually start giving live projects to product design and industrial design and graphic design courses to give that exposure, because the practicality of design is you want live projects. You want to understand the industry to design it. So I think for us, those live projects were what gave us a kind of porthole into different industries, and perhaps that's something we can do as an industry to attract people.
I agree, absolutely, and like there's a lot there. And sometimes I've discovered some fear out there of certain companies not wanting to give out live projects because there is a commercial strain on that, and there's a risk. Live projects don't have to be real. They can be written as, I can write you a brief right now based on all the experience I've got of the briefs that come to me. It won't be real. It would be, it needs to be perceived that way. But I think that would be, live projects, one to group, visits from designers, from project managers, from salespeople, or whatever it is, into those universities in the early stages of the course to talk about those sort of things, and talk about the let's be honest as well. Well, literally, let's be honest. We need to be talking about the real job, not the dream job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no point in making everybody think it's absolutely rosy. We want to be able to have the benefit of honesty of talking about how difficult it can be, both in terms of budget constraints and space constraints and regulations and stuff like that. No point hiding from it. We'll just lose them quicker. So I think that's a really important point. Live projects and also apprenticeships and all sorts of things might come into this in terms of training between different years. I think that's a very important point. I've started to look at that, if I'm honest, and I'm working at the university. Obviously, I'm lucky that I've been doing some stuff with NEC Events Week every year for the last, literally 10 years. That's great because it gives me a really good insight of the quality of the students in terms of the questions they they ask. It's fantastic. But obviously, that's only one side of it. The other side is the skill sets that they're popping out the other end with. So I think there are obviously some quite specific courses as well, which are, event management is one, but also there are, like you said, product design, but also interior architecture and event architecture courses.
Mm-hmm.
As De Montfort have got one, I think, and that's interiors. And obviously there's a couple up north, and there's also Bournemouth, I think, has got a really good course. Lincoln obviously is well known. So I think there are some hot spots for that. Maybe we need to initially just fixate on those courses and make sure they're really getting the best and most information update on the sector as it is, today, as like a temperature check.
Yeah, I agree. So we all know that good design can have a huge impact on exhibitor experience and exhibitor success, but flipping that on its head, what impact does it have on the exhibitor if we don't have good designers and good design stands?
Well, we'll get lazy exhibitors, because lazy design can lead to lazy exhibiting, and throwing everything onto a stand because no one tells you it's a bad idea to have 20,000 words that people are not going to read on a piece of graphics. Let's give people the benefit of our experience in terms of good design being sometimes the best amount of words is no words, isn't it, in terms of an image on a stand being very powerful. And it's the same with using persona marketing and understanding your audience and getting to grips with the fact that these are people coming to these shows, they're not numbers. So I think if we lose an element of design, the first failure really will be for exhibitors, because they won't see the return. The design is poor, both structurally or thinking wise, everything we've spoken about today. They'll lose the ability to turn that into ROI. Horrible phrase, but whatever that means. And I think there are ways that it could be recovered post show, but really it's the potential you've lost on stand-up. We're face to face for a reason, right? And it doesn't work 3 weeks after the show. You need a memory of what works at the show, but you've really got to have had some sort of face time, literally at the show itself. So I think if the design is lacking in terms of planning and color and lighting and all those sort of things we've touched on, I think that the exhibitors will suffer, and then visitor numbers obviously may deteriorate because the shows just aren't being punchy enough, and then we're on a slight downward spiral. So keeping the design quality as high as possible is absolutely the thing to do, and I think we should be shouting about the really good design approaches. And we've got an e-guide obviously in the industry. I'm genuinely thinking we need some sort of D-guide for design, a way of thinking about creativity and all the practicalities that come. How could we do that? Is that something we could achieve? I'm thinking about it now and again. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago in passing, almost as like a joke, and I've been thinking about it, thinking actually that would work quite well. New designers get entry to it, like maybe some sort of little catalogue of creatives in the back. I don't know. It's an interesting idea, but the e-guide is all about the quality and safety of what you build, and many other things as well. Maybe the D-guide could be copyright pending, could be something that it talks about the way of thinking that ends up in those constructions that then get built and have to comply to those e-guide rules. So maybe there's a way of doing that, some sort of academy to back it up. Not sure.
I think it's a great idea, and Thanks. I think they have it. They have it in our you and me. That's it. That is in place in other industries.
Yeah, it is. That's the irony. That's the irony. But we don't. It's really weird, isn't it? Really strange.
Yeah, it is. It is odd. So, obviously, design influences so many things. And given my background in floor plan design in my past life, you can influence the way people walk. You can influence how people perceive the show. So, something we used to do quite a lot was in quieter areas, we would just shrink the aisles down to 2 meters, and that would compress people, and the exhibitors that are on those 2 meter aisles have a better experience because they feel like it's busier and it's not a big wide expanse of aisle with no one in it. So from an attendee perspective, what do you think we underestimate the impact of design on attendees and the experience of the show itself?
I do personally, yeah. And also I've been talking a lot today about the exhibition stands themselves, but of course we can't forget that part of that design, if you like, protocol is entrance areas, theatres, feature stands. There are many other pieces of event architecture in an event other than paying exhibitors on their little plot of land or their large plot of land. So how they work together, to your point, I think as you don't go to a show and you're at the show, you go through the show. You see things, you hear things, you smell things, you have an experience as you go through it, and then when you come away, you have a memory of the hot spots that you like the best. And that's how I approach briefing the designers when I'm looking at it that way. It's all about the memory of what of those at least 5 senses. So I think we are underestimating it if we don't sort of try and attack all of those senses, but also think about what people think and what they feel a couple of weeks after the show, and then, or obviously maybe the day after the show. So I think people's journey through a space from the very first point of, or the first touch point well ahead of the show, which obviously you're more versed in that than I, all the way through to the architecture of the show and how it can be pain-free and all the things we talk about as an industry in terms of making better events rather than just prettier events. Very, very important. And you are right, pinched aisles, those sort of things, breakout areas, the guy in the corner at a show which is potentially badly planned, who's stuck behind a theatre area and never sees anybody because all he can hear is the theatre PA system going off every 2 minutes, and it's a problem. He is likely to not attend again, or if he does, he's probably unstable. It's very, very difficult to do that. And how do you get around that? It's very, very difficult, I would say, from a planning point of view in terms of your background, but also from a visitor engagement point of view, where are organisers good enough yet to doing the research post-show to find out what people really thought about layout? I think it's more the overall appeal of a show, and some organisers obviously are really good understanding whether people took away great memories from a show. What about the design specifics? Is the planning always perfect? No. How can we make it better? Don't know. That's the trick. So I think it's a little bit of a black art, isn't it? Really, it is a collaboration of all those things we've spoken about in terms of planning and texture and all those sort of things. But people are sort of psychological beasts, really. They'll take away the information they want to. They'll hate the things they don't like. They'll need information. If they don't get the information, they'll walk on. They'll maybe do it. And the thing about turning left as you go into a show doesn't really apply for me. We proved it wrong many times. And there's a lot of psycho thinking in there that I don't think really works. I think you're attracted by what you're attracted to in terms of as you enter a hall, aren't you? And it's not always something that's bigger, more expensive and 60 yards away. Sometimes it's a thing that's right there and really cool. And I've never seen it before. And the surprise factor and people's, love for new things is obviously it's no different to retail, really. You think about the amount of bias retailers put on, shops that offer new stuff and new tech or whatever it is. It really is no different. And we shouldn't be any different because it's a different type of shop window, isn't it? It's a commercial environment, just happens to be dressed up as a piece of, exhibition architecture. So I think there's a lot to miss out on if we get it wrong. But in terms of people's navigation through events, it's not really changed that much over the years, I would suggest. It's quite interesting, really. That really is something that's remained for me quite linear, I guess, in terms of people's journey through a show. I can't remember the last time I went to a show and I was shocked by a layout. So let's put it that way. Can you?
No. No. Well, yes. I think with layouts, actually, it's, I don't know, if you're walking through London, it's really difficult. It's hard to navigate. If you're walking through New York, all you need to do is be able to count, and you can find where you need to go. And I think simpler is always better. So, and I've been through kind of various different exercises with people that want to jazz up their floor plan, and I always say to them, like, what it looks like from the top down is not important. What you want to do is make it easy to find the exhibitors. They're going to get the sensory overload by being on an amazing stand, not by walking the aisles. So yeah, I think simpler is always better. Grid systems are always better. I
suppose the only corollary to that really is that it's really nice to be surprised. And if you walk around the corner and you see something up close that you couldn't see from 50, 60 yards away because of the layout of the show, that's actually quite a lovely thing, isn't it? In terms of not just for that exhibitor, but for the visitor who's happened upon something. So you're right. When you're walking through London, you turn around the corner and there's a park that you'd forgotten was there. You don't tend to get that in New York, do you? Because you can see everything 2 bloody miles away. So it's exactly the point. So I suppose there's a happy medium, isn't there, of shows that have that sort of the surprising sector and then the main area of that. And I think some shows have tried that. Grand Designs is an example, for example, where they worked on the 45-degree grid and stuff like that. But that just annoyed people at the time.
Yeah.
And their weird triangular stands with their triangular storerooms.
Well, it's probably because it was a triangular venue to start with.
Bloody was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's so many different floor plan layouts we tried. Actually, Grand Design ended up with a really nice layout where it
absolutely
puts you in the middle of the show and splits out. So yeah, it's quite
exactly
to work on that one. So final thoughts and takeaways. If you wanted someone to come away after watching this with 3 key pointers, what would they be?
Well, I think for the new designers entering, I haven't really thought about it in those terms, but for the new designers entering the industry that have just sort of finding out what sort of a landscape it is, I think it's that curiosity factor. It's that sort of learning off, obviously, people with more experience, and also learning off project managers, learning off salespeople, learning off people that are other than designers, because that's a great trick as well. If you can master that skill, it's fantastic, rather than only learning off sort of team peers. So I think for that market, let's call it, of thinkers, it's being agile thinkers, like I said earlier, and really trying to immerse yourself in the stuff that probably didn't even exist a few years ago, or if it did, it was undermined or not really thought about. For the more experienced heads, I think it's the same, but the opposite. Make sure you impart that experience down in terms of layout planning, like you've just been talking about, and that sort of layers of thinking. Talk about what doesn't work. It's not always about success. Sometimes the best stand design is the one that didn't work properly, but it was absolutely provable why, and therefore that mistake is unlikely to be made again. And that trust built up between designer or agency or contractor and exhibitor, and indeed the organizer, because that comes into play as well. That trust is built up from learning, isn't it, rather than just doing. And I think that's such a simple thing to say, but what an important thing that is, and easy to forget and ignore. And then, not really in the right order, but going back to the student population, I think from what we've been talking about, I think it's probably pretty clear that we both agree, and I think other people in this sector would as well, that getting in earlier is probably really, really valid and a great thing to do in terms of, we were talking about obviously live projects and apprenticeships and all those sort of internships. I think that's got to be amplified up a bit more, really, because we're doing so much in our sector, and post-COVID, generally speaking, it's grown really, really well. But the weak spots are more to do with not getting in to universities and even schools earlier, and actually talking about the fact that one day you could be working on a stage for Stormzy, the next day you could be looking at a Grand Designs, let's pick one, and the next day you could be working on an outdoor festival that's a HR festival in the middle of a field. So that diversity of thinking is probably one thing, as we said, I touched on earlier, that keeps designers and other people, not just designers in the industry, because it's not the same every day. So we need to probably keep highlighting that and make sure that people who are thinking about which industry to go into choose our sector. Let's get grabby. Let's grab the best ones, not just the ones that are keenest. And I think that's probably something we need to do, and they need to be aware that we're trying to do that, rather than it being some sort of hidden veil of secrecy. So I think an open approach to that sort of level of thinking and creativity across all three, if you like, as well as employers, is the key to all of this, personally.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm just shocked that the D guy didn't make the top 3, to be honest.
Well, you got picky fights, haven't you? Maybe I need to graphically design its cover first and then release it to market.
Yeah, that's.
But I mean, of course, I'm joking. I mean, it may be that it should. It may be that it should be number 1, but obviously, I think you'd have to probably write it and release it and make sure people actually had a value from it. But I don't really know what it would look like inside. I've talked about it too much. Let's never speak of it again.
We'll park it. So, where can people connect with you?
Andy at teamtecna.com, absolutely fine. Drop me a line if there's anything you think I can help with from the sort of more commercial side of things. Obviously there. I'm always on LinkedIn, post a lot, do a lot of work with the Tecna marketing team. So LinkedIn's the easiest and best place, really, because I can be quite easily found on there. That's more or less it. I don't tend to bother with lots of other socials because I tend to fixate on that and use that as the main driver. So absolutely drop me a line for something you think I can assist with. I'll always try. And obviously on the wider side, if you think there's something that Tecna do well that would benefit from you, either as an employee or as an exhibitor or as an organizer, same thing. Feel free.
And you turned up in a big way at Convex this year. What's your next event where you'll be?
Looking at a few options. I'm sure we'll return to Convex. So I think there's several other shows, maybe not the obvious shows that we'll consider. But obviously in our launch year, obviously not launch, our rebrand year, obviously there are other sort of internal things. We take internal comms very, very seriously in terms of the events that we produce ourselves for local charities and things like that. You'll see a lot of that, or some of that anyway, popping out on socials. So some of our events will be not behind closed doors, but they'll be almost for suppliers and partners and that sort of thing. So I think that blend of not always going and bragging in an exhibition hall, even if you've got some good stuff to say, is really nice to actually spread that across the teams. We put a lot of value on that. That ESG factor now is making sustainability ecologically, economically, and socially much more valuable. That's the word, than just saying look how much we recycle. So those things knit together really, really nicely, along with health and safety and other things, and PR and HR. So I think, you'll see us at certain events, but some are yet to be decided based on their likely return, cost, and worth.
Excellent. I'm sure we'll see you soon. Thanks again for joining us today. Great discussion. Thank you. We'll catch up soon.
You will do. See you soon, Adam.